Councillor Teddy Barnes, Mayor of Hillingdon, and as Mayor, I shall be chairing the meeting. I have alongside me at a safe distance the Head of Democratic Services, Lloyd White. The rest of the members of the Council are joining us from their homes. You are all very welcome. You may have noted from the agenda that we will shortly be conducting a roll call. Please refer to your agenda and order of business throughout the meeting, as it will help guide you through the business tonight. Before we start, I would like to emphasise some important online housekeeping rules for everyone present. I would like to remind you to please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent. To please keep your microphone muted when not speaking, and then unmute to speak only if called upon by myself or the Head of Democratic Services. Just imagine we are all in the council chamber, the same rules all apply. That only one person should speak at a time, that the Code of Conduct rules apply equally to this virtual meeting as to when we meet in person. I expect an immaculate standard of behaviour. That if you are speaking tonight, and you should have already indicated to the Head of Democratic Services that you wish to do so, please keep it brief and to the point. The traditional timer is in operation at this end, and I will be reminding you when your time is almost up. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, for instance, has lost connection, I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate, which is 17 councillors. I will now move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, and ask the Head of Democratic Services to read out any apologies that they have been received.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening to you all, members of the Council and members of the public watching. I have 4 apologies. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Chamdale, Councillors Cooper, Harangi, and Lavery, and barring any others or any absences when we do the roll call, that will mean there are 40 members of the Conservative group and 21 members of the Labour group for when we come to voting.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, the minutes. You should have received the minutes for the meetings held on the 20th of February and the 14th of May 2020. I shall take it that they are approved unless any member indicates otherwise. Agenda item 3, roll call and declarations of interest. The Head of Democratic Services, Lloyd White, will now call all members in alphabetical order.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, members of the Council, much like when we do a recorded vote, I shall call you individually. I would ask you to unmute, state that you are present, and at the same time, if you have any declarations of interest to make on the matters before us tonight, state them then. If you don't have any declarations, you don't need to state that, just state that you are present. So, here we go. Councillor Ahmad Walana.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen has left the meeting, and we'll wait for her to come back, but I'm sure I did see her. Councillor Arnold.
Good evening. Yes, I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bianco.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Birra.
Good evening, I'm present.
Councillor Bliss. I can see that Councillor Bliss is actually present. Councillor Bridges.
Good evening, I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brightman.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Burrows.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chamdal. Oh, sorry, I've already given his apologies. That's my mistake. Councillor Chapman.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Chubadar.
Good evening, I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Cawthorne.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curling.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dennis.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor DeVille.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Dillon.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Dott. Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, good evening, Lloyd, and everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Eglinton.
Hello, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Farley.
Good evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Good evening, Lloyd, and everyone else. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Fife.
Thank you, Lloyd, I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner.
I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Goddard.
Hello, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Graham.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Hagger.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Hensley.
Good evening, Lloyd, and I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lakmana.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Lewis.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Makwana.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Markham.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Melvin.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Milani.
Evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Douglas Mills.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Mills.
Good evening. Present.
Thank you. And your dog. Councillor Money.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Good evening, Mr. White. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morse.
Good evening, everybody. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Brien, I can see, but you're... Oh, there you go.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Oswell.
Yeah, good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Good evening, all. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Radia.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Good evening, Lloyd and everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Rodriguez. Thank you.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Sansapuri. Did you hear that? Councillor Sansapuri? I can see actually at the top that he is present there. Councillor Seaman Digby.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Singh.
Good evening, everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Stead.
Good evening, I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Tuckwell.
Good evening, I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Yarrow.
Good evening, I am present.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, I can see you sitting beside me. Councillor Allen, can I just request if you are present, because when I called you before you left the meeting, have you rejoined?
I hadn't rejoined, my mute wasn't working.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in addition, I would like to confirm that the officers present are the Chief Executive, the Deputy Chief Executive and Corporate Director of Resident Services, the Corporate Director of Finance, the Corporate Director of Social Care, Mr. Glenn Egan on behalf of the Borough Solicitor, Mr. Mark Braddock, Nikki O'Halloran, Morgan Einan and Beth Rainey. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 4, which is the report from Democratic Services. Item 1, the temporary suspension of the council procedure rules for virtual council meetings only. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 4 parts to this report. I will first move part 1 relating to the suspension of council procedure rules for this virtual council meeting. I will then move parts 2 and 3 relating to urgent implementation of decisions and a proposed change to a committee membership. Finally, I will move part 4, which is required to update the council constitution relating to the Business and Planning Bill 2020. Madam Mayor, the first recommendation is that under Standing Order 26.1, Council agreed to temporarily suspend the specific standing orders set out in the report for the purpose of holding virtual council meetings with immediate effect. Furthermore, Council agrees the immediate resumption of these standing orders for any traditional, that's a physical council meeting in the future. The relevant amendments and procedural rules detailed are set out in the report. For the avoidance of doubt, this standing order suspension refers only at this time to this council meeting. The situation will be reviewed again before our next scheduled meeting in September. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I formally second and reserve my right?
Thank you. As there are no other speakers notified, I will assume the recommendation is approved unless any member indicates that they wish to vote against. Thank you. So shall we move on to item 2 and 3? Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Part 2 of the report asks Council to note the use of urgency decisions made since the meeting of Council on the 20th of February. These are as detailed in the agenda. Part 3 requests Council's approval to replace Councillor Stead with Councillor Chapman as a Conservative group member of the Licensing Committee. I move the recommendation in Part 2 and 3 of the report.
Councillor Bianco.
I second that.
Thank you. As there are no other speakers that have been notified, we will now go to the vote. I will call on you first, Councillor Curling. Councillor Curling, as leader of the Labour Group, on behalf of the Labour Group, is the recommendation approved?
Approved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, is the recommendation approved?
Approved, Madam Mayor.
If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leaders, please indicate now verbally or via the chat method. Thank you. We should move on to item 4. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Part 4 of the report covers the amendment to the Council Constitution required to allow a practical implementation of the issue of pavement licences, the period of such licences and the fee charged for each licence. A pavement licence can be requested by a business selling food and drink for consumption on or off of the premises. They may apply for a pavement licence to authorise the placement of removable furniture on part of the pavement or highway adjacent to their premises. Each application must be published by the council by way of public consultation for 7 days commencing on the day after receipt. Following the period of consultation, if the council does not determine the application within the following 7 days, the application is deemed to have been approved for a 12-month period. Particularly in our current Covid uncertainty, this would be extremely difficult to do at member level. And the danger is that inappropriate licences would be deemed approved by default. Consequently, it is recommended that council delegates the decision-making to officers. Any decision to revoke a pavement licence will be taken by officers in consultation with the chairman or vice chairman of the licensing committee. A maximum charge of £100 can be levied for the issue of a licence for any period up to 12 months. As council is aware, our policy in Hillingdon regarding all fees and charges is to be at least 10% cheaper than our neighbouring boroughs. Both Hounslow and Ealing will charge £100 for a 6-month licence and Harrow £100 for a 12-month licence. The 90% average calculation would provide us with a licence fee of £75 for 6 months. However, bearing in mind that many businesses have suffered financially during the lockdown, as part of our programme of assistance to local businesses, the Hillingdon fee will be £50 for a 4-month licence, with £20 charged for the next 2 months, 2 4-month extensions, totalling £90 for 12 months. In reality, given that the first 4-month licence will run until a date in November, many will not want outside tables and chairs in the winter months. Madam Mayor, I formally move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
And I formally second the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Curling, you are down to speak on this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just a few quick points. Broadly speaking, the Labour Group support these recommendations, but we do have certain concerns around the enforcement of things like antisocial behaviour, smoking, noise nuisance, and also the access for people with disabilities. The group also noted that the fees by other local authorities seem to be a lot more than Hillingdon, and we can only assume that that is because they have regard to the extra costs incurred by providing this service, whereas Hillingdon's position is to undercut our neighbours by 10%. But with those comments on board, as I say, we support the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot, you can now exercise your right to reply.
Thank you. I do note Councillor Curling's comments, and obviously they will need to be taken into consideration. One of the reasons for a 4-month licence is also it gives us the opportunity to consider not renewing a licence if certain conditions aren't met. The fee situation, the fact of the matter, Councillor Curling, is our neighbouring authorities aren't as financially viable as we are. Our charge is far less than a 10% reduction, with charging £100 for 6 months and £90 for 12 months. It's more than 10%. But with that, I think we can move to the vote, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and we shall do. We will start with Councillor Curling again. So as the leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, is the recommendation approved?
Approved, Madam Mayor.
The leader of the council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, is the recommendation approved?
Approved, Madam Mayor.
If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leaders, please indicate now verbally or via the chat method. We shall now move on to agenda item 5. Part 1 of agenda item 5, the mayoral announcements. We will now observe a minute's silence in memory of the recently departed Mr. Terry Dix, who was a former deputy leader of the London Borough of Hillingdon and MP for Hayes and Harlington, and also for Mr. Timothy McCarthy, who was the mayor's escort. Thank you. I'll now move on to part 2 of the mayoral announcements, my announcements. The calming start to my mayoral year commenced with a few uplifting emails. The first was from Samuel Clayton, Boy Scout, aged 12, who wrote to me describing his lockdown life in the borough. Samuel wanted to thank us for the regular bin collections and the beautiful open spaces that he had been enjoying with his mum during lockdown. Samuel had also proudly attached a picture of his artwork supporting the NHS, which he said was visible on his front windows. I also received another lockdown story from Karshini, aged 10, from Hayes, who was raising money for a children's charity. Karshini wanted to break her own Guinness World Record of hula hooping for more than 3 minutes. I watched online while her proud parents streamed the event live on social media. Karshini rapidly hula hooped even though the strong winds were against her, and at one point looked like she was about to take off, but did achieve her goal and broke her own record, plus raised well over her target figure for her charity. I'm sure Councillor Morgan may remember her during his time as mayor. Recently, I got to meet at a social distance the Hillingdon for All volunteers, who told me lots of stories about the wonderful work they were doing to serve our residents. I'd like to thank Daisy and Laura and everyone else that helped. I also got to meet the skipping Sikh Rajinder Singh, aged 73, and his family from Harlington. The skipping Sikh has vigorously skipped for many weeks through lockdown and raised money for the NHS, getting on BBC News and becoming the face for Hillingdon's Age UK on their recent campaign, plus becoming their ambassador. I was amazed at just how agile and humble Mr. Singh was and how his zest for life was so infectious. The Mayoralty has also moved to more online engagement with residents, as I had the chance to send out video messages which have been recorded and edited by Cameron, with Eloisa holding my speeches as she drops the mic and Morgan holding my mic. We had the privilege to record these messages for the Polish Airmen, for Armed Forces Week, for her care home resident Anna for our 100th birthday, and for the celebration ceremony at the Green Corridor charity near Heathrow. And we are still receiving regular requests for more videos. Hence, we are now exploring setting up a new video social media platform to keep up with the demand. Other online engagement was with the St. Mary's the Virgin Church's Hayes Facebook page, who I joined as a friend. I was able to participate in their Flower Festival Lockdown Challenge and posted photos of the beautiful flowers in the parlour as my floral attempt. But I must say the other participants put me to shame with their wonderful stylish displays. I would like to thank Rosemary Markham for drawing my attention to this very gratifying challenge. I've also been busy on Zoom, getting the chance to talk to others, but one of the most enigmatic Zoom meetings was with the senior staff at Harefield Hospital. Nicholas Hunt said, everyone from the cleaners to the senior staff all supported each other throughout a difficult time physically and emotionally. The staff's outstanding ability to manage through the pandemic with such excellence, dedication, and efficiency meant all their patients received the utmost amazing care. The brief stories from the clinicians of how they managed in all departments was a truly uplifting 75 minutes. And I would like to thank them for their time and for being so humble and so inspiring. Lastly, it is nice to see that I will be venturing out over the next couple of months, along with all my hand gels, wipes, face masks and gloves, and will get the chance to meet people face to face and talk to them without a laptop screen or camera in the way. It has come at a perfect time, as I still not have seen the mayoral car, but have been told that it needs a good run to stop the battery going flat, so I'm glad I can be of some assistance. We will now move on to part 3. I now call upon the Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, to make a statement in order to update all members of the Council regarding the Council's ongoing response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The COVID pandemic is one of the most dangerous challenges that this world has faced in our lifetime. It is a human crisis with severe health and social economic consequences. And whilst progress has been made in dealing with this disease at national and local level, it remains necessary for this council to focus its attention and resources on dealing with this disease as its major priority at this time. Hillingdon is recognised as one of the best run councils in the country, and our ability to manage finance and business process has provided a firm base and the practical ability to deal as possible with the COVID-19 pandemic at council level. We currently estimate the cost of the COVID pandemic at £25 million in the current financial year. Government funding received and anticipated amounts at this time to £22 million, leaving a shortfall of £3 million. Accordingly, to cover this sum if required, at the end of March we set aside £5.6 million in reserves, and at the Cabinet meeting next Thursday, that sum will be increased to just over £9 million. Normal council activity in the first 2 months of the financial year showed us operating at £361,000 under budget. The year-end balance is anticipated to be over £28 million. Madam Mayor, I provide this summary of our financial position not to indicate any form of complacency. We still have much to do, but given media coverage of councils on the brink of financial collapse, to indicate to our residents that we in Hillingdon are still financially stable. The physical and mental health and well-being of all residents and our staff has been and will remain our priority. There's been much well-deserved praise for our NHS workers and carers. In Hillingdon, both council and private sector care workers have been outstanding. To ensure the continuity and stability of bed-based home care and outreach care provisions for our residents, we use funding provided by the government to support both council and private facilities, with frontline staff receiving a 10% salary uplift for the period April to June. We also provided over £2 million worth of PPE to care homes in the borough. We created a community hub to help those residents who were shielded or at risk with deliveries of food and prescription medicines, or for those who just needed to speak to someone. Over 100 members of staff, mainly from the library and business assurance teams, helped provide this service. Our parks and open spaces have remained open and well maintained since the start of the pandemic. Those facilities have been extremely important, enabling all residents, young and old, to have some form of exercise in the open air. And I would like to say a special thank you to our Green Spaces team, who have continued working so well throughout the past 4 months. Outdoor playgrounds and gyms have been closed, but are now all being inspected and reopened with appropriate signage. The majority of playgrounds will be open by the end of this week, with outdoor gyms to follow. Our weekly waste and recycling services have continued throughout the lockdown period, with many residents expressing thanks and gratitude to the staff involved, who had to deal with an exceptional amount of waste and recycling as residents in lockdown cleared out everything from their wardrobes to their gardens. Libraries are now reopening in a controlled manner, with 7 libraries dealing with the lending of books and a further 7 allowing limited access to IT equipment. All libraries are being provided with protective screens, PPE signage and equipment for cash-free transactions to allow them to open more fully on a phased basis. Throughout the lockdown period, we have provided all schools with free PPE and school and social distance marking outside of schools. All Hillingdon schools will reopen in September. One of the anticipated consequences of the lockdown was an increase in the number of domestic abuse cases reported, and sadly this has come to pass. In the period March to mid-July last year, there were 32 reported cases. In the same period this year, the number is 76, a 138% increase. I am grateful to Councillors Palmer and Gardner for the work they do for victims of domestic abuse, and for the amazing staff team that we have in Hillingdon providing support to those victims. And for the avoidance of doubt, all forms of abuse, including racial and homophobic abuse, are not acceptable in Hillingdon either. Trying to assist businesses to get through the lockdown period and beyond has again seen our staff performing very well, with finance staff paying out over £41 million in support grants to local businesses, and licensing of food safety teams assisting over 1,200 shops and hospitality sector businesses to reopen, providing assistance with risk assessments and pavement markings. Across the borough, we are putting up lamppost banners urging support for local high streets and shopping parades. As regards the number of registered deaths attributed to COVID in Hillingdon, to date these total 291. From the 24th to the end of March, the figure was 24. In April, it was 220, May 39, June 4, and July to date 4. Of those, 216 deaths occurred in hospital, 48 in care homes and 27 in the community. Whilst the death rate has dropped significantly recently, we cannot be complacent. Infection is still occurring, and only last week, Hillingdon went from being one of the lowest boroughs for new infections to the highest in London due to a number of staff at Hillingdon Hospital testing positive. I'm pleased to say that as of this afternoon, the ambulance service has been resumed at Hillingdon Hospital, and with the exception of a small cohort of patients, the hospital is returning to normal service. Since then, also since last week, our infection rate has dropped, and we're now 10th highest in London with 3 cases per 100,000 residents. Accordingly, going forward, we will need to remain vigilant and focused on the health and well-being of all of our residents of all ages being our priority. And recognising the unique severity of the current situation, refrain from the traditional political knockabout activities and campaigns and concentrate all our efforts on dealing with the COVID-19 and its consequences for all of our people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Puddifoot, for that detailed response. We're going to move on to agenda item 6, which is the questions from members of the public, which I shall read out to all members in one block, and then we should receive an answer. If I do pronounce any questioners' names incorrectly, please accept my apologies in advance. Question 6.1 from Mr. Kieran Durker of Harlington Road, Uxbridge, to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot. Given recent events and the proper discussions now ongoing around the UK, why does this borough not commit to raising awareness about race issues as part of a dedicated Black History Month? Does the council not agree that Black Lives Matter too? Question 6.2 from Kiri Kankwendi of Hemel Lane in Hayes to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot. In light of the recent Black Lives Matter protests across the world and the country, which have highlighted the ongoing issue of structural racism and the need for education, a deeper understanding of UK history and context, would the council consider reinstating Black History Month in Hillingdon in addition to diversity celebrations in the borough, considering it as a vital educational resource about racism, justice and equality, rather than a celebration of diversity, which is easily done at any time of the year and indeed is already marked through Hayes Carnival and other events in the borough? Question 6.3 from Mr. Roy Stout of Material Walk, Hayes, to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot. Why does the borough refuse to acknowledge Black History Month despite the diversity of its constituents? Question 6.4 from Dr. Kanth of Hayes to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot. It has come to my attention that Hillingdon does not acknowledge or celebrate Black History Month. Does the borough not value the rich and diverse population here, and does it not recognise that education regarding race and difference promotes unity? Will the borough introduce Black History Month? Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for those questions to the questioners. As indicated in agenda item 4, which we voted on earlier, I will provide a written answer to all questioners. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to move on to agenda item 7, which is questions from members. Councillor Duncan, please present your question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask a question to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot. As the government has now confirmed that it will provide postcode information to councils, will the council add regular, local, updated information about the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths in the borough by ward if possible to the council's website? This would give residents much needed, easily accessible, reliable evidence of what is happening in their area, reassure parents that it is safe to send their children to school, older residents that it is safe to shop, and warn of any spikes that may occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan, for your question. And again, as indicated in agenda item 4, I will provide you with a written answer shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to agenda item 8. We now move on to the evening's motions to consider. Motion 8.1, Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group have moved several motions in the Council chamber requesting that Black History Month be restored to Hillingdon since it was discontinued in 2007. And we will continue to keep this request on the agenda so that Black history is not forgotten. We live in the hope that maybe, just maybe, the administration will recognise that the need for this less blinkered account of our history and heritage and the need for specific Black history to be celebrated and commemorated. We should not allow the subject of Black history to become some sort of modern culture war, but we should recognise with honesty the horrific nature of the history around the slave trade and how our colonial past treated Black people. This doesn't mean trying to remove all traces of such atrocities or trying to rewrite history, but simply giving a true account of what happened and how we can learn from it today. This is where the Council can really help by spending a month focused specifically on Black history. Of course, it's not just about slavery. We also have some very positive things to celebrate. In Victorian times, at the height of the British Empire, one of the legends that everybody will be familiar with is Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, who was a nurse caring for soldiers in the Crimea War. A very topical, very topical, especially with large temporary hospitals being built for the COVID-19 pandemic, carrying her name. The Nightingale hospitals in London, Birmingham, Bristol, Exeter, Harrogate, Manchester and Washington. However, another British nurse and pioneering heroine of the Crimean War was Mary Seacole, a Black nurse of Jamaican heritage. But the history and legend of Mary Seacole is nowhere near that of Florence Nightingale. It is only relatively in recent times that Mary Seacole was recognised in our history. Indeed, even the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, had no knowledge of Mary Seacole until he attended an event at his daughter's school, which led him to write in his blog, and I quote, "I find myself facing the grim possibility that it was my own education that was blinkered and that of my children that are now receiving more faithful account of the heroism in Imperial Britain than I did." Madam Mayor, we also know what happens when we forget specific Black history, like the Windrush generation who came to this country by invitation and spent their lives contributing to society, working in transport, the NHS, and generally doing all the jobs we now call key worker jobs. The Windrush generation spent their lives as our key workers, and their history was forgotten, leading to many being detained as illegal immigrants and even deported. A hostile environment for Black British key workers. This is not in colonial times of the British Empire, but almost 20 years into the 21st century. Madam Mayor, as my closing statement, I would ask elected members to ponder on these thoughts. With 7 Nightingale hospitals, why is there not even one Seacole hospital? Why did the Windrush generation get so badly treated in such modern times? And why recognising specific Black history is so vital in avoiding a blinkered education. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Madam Mayor and Council, the early origin of Black History Month were devised by celebrated African-American historian Carter G. Woodson in 1926 at the height of Jim Crow laws and segregation in America. In Britain, during the 1980s, Black people found themselves fighting for tolerance, acceptance, and against marginalization and racism. It is in this context that Black History Month was adopted in the UK. In 1987, the concept of Black History Month was developed and adopted at the GLC and the London Strategic Policy Unit with support of politicians, senior officers, and community activists. Due to their action, the first official Black History Month event took place on the 1st of October, 1987. The above celebration created a catalyst for many local authorities, including Hillingdon, to formally institute the month of October as Black History Month in the UK. This event also called on authorities to implement their duty under the Race Relations Act 1976, thus giving positive affirmation to children and young people, identity and self-worth. Today, across many communities in the UK, during October, over 4,000 events are organized celebrating Black History Month in various communities. In conclusion, and in line with the above outline, I would like to state the following in support of the motion. The most recent event of the Windrush generation and the acknowledgement of the contribution that this generation made to the Commonwealth and the war effort in Britain is cause for celebration as a Black History Month event. Some 13 years ago, Hillingdon Council changed the name from Black History Month to Local History and Heritage Month. I would implore the Council and those present to seriously consider the reinstatement of Black History Month as a standalone event in the month of October in Hillingdon. In so doing this, Council will be honouring the hopes and aspiration of what started in 1926. Since 1987, this event and celebration of Black communities across the UK is and has been an annual event. I am therefore again imploring Council to be part of this celebration and fulfill the wishes of Black community in Hillingdon, who you represent by restoring Black History Month. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson, could you confirm that you are seconding?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm seconding the motion.
Thank you. We're going to now go on to other speakers. Councillor Dillon, you are down to speak on this motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. I'm saddened to be speaking once again on this motion. This should have never been removed from the Council's yearly programme. I'm saddened that in the past, so many councillors in this day and age feel that it's okay not to have celebration of Black History Month in our calendar. And I sincerely hope today that all our councillors, and especially those from the BAME community and all those who have suffered discrimination through ignorance, vote in favour of this motion. Let me quote the Prime Minister from 2019. Black History Month always provides a fantastic opportunity for us to recognise the outstanding contributions of people of African and Caribbean descent. The contributions to our country over many generations, from business, law, education, technology, sport, and the creative arts. Black British people continue to leave an indelible mark on every sphere of life in Britain. We not only look back with enormous gratitude to African Caribbean community for the large contribution to Britain, but we also look forward to the future of our great country and for the chance for all of us to share in the bright future. And he then went on to wish everyone a successful month. The Member of Parliament for Hayes and Harlington is on record for how important it is to Black History Month. That's 2 out of the 3 MPs from Hillingdon on record. I hope today, and I'm pretty much sure that the 3rd MP also holds similar views and will vote today in favour of this motion. Madam Mayor, it's our duty as representatives for our borough to push these positive messages in our community. It's not only my belief that many of the young parents or otherwise in our community whose children go to schools believe that we should celebrate Black History Month. I question every single councillor. How many of those people have you actually asked for their view on this motion? Black History Month gives our children an opportunity to be educated about positive role models such as George Washington Carver, Mae Jemison, Neil deGrasse, James West, who invented the microphone and allows us to speak on our iPads tonight. And closer to home, Bernie Grant, the first black MP, Diane Abbott, the first black female MP, Dame Linda Dobbs, and Kenneth Fraser, the CEO of Merck, whose company could be at the forefront of helping in a COVID-19 vaccine. Black History Month is not about teaching just about slavery. It is, as the Prime Minister said, a chance to celebrate the contribution of our residents and that they've made to our community. To vote against this motion will be nothing short of a travesty for our children, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to vote in favour of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's absolutely outrageous that in 2020 we should still be talking about the colour of people's skin. Surely we should have learned something in the 57 years since Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but upon their character." That was, of course, in the US, where it would seem that not much has changed in the intervening years, and where tragic events like the killing of George Floyd still seem to be a regular occurrence. But Madam Mayor, Minneapolis is 4,000 miles away from Uxbridge, and hopefully a world apart from how our police force work and our way of life. In the US, 999 people were shot and killed by the police last year. In contrast, 3 were shot and killed by the UK police in 2019. And that included Osman Khan on London Bridge after he attacked and killed 3 totally innocent people. Look, I'm not saying life here is perfect and there's no discrimination. We must all fight discrimination wherever and whenever we see it, and work hard to integrate and make all of our various peoples into one people, whatever their creed, colour or sexuality, and to make all of them feel truly valued and proud to live in Hillingdon. Discrimination is totally abhorrent and must never have a place in our society. We are inordinately proud of all of our diverse communities, which I'm delighted to say have integrated well to form a strong, cohesive community under the Hillingdon flag. Madam Mayor, Black History Month was celebrated in our libraries until 2007, but in 2008, the emphasis was changed and moved to celebrating the whole range of diverse community groups and cultures found throughout the borough. We believe that we shouldn't merely educate our residents for a month every year about the fantastic contribution that our BAME communities have made, but that we should celebrate and educate throughout the year. To do this, the library service has put out lots of social media around BAME authors, their books, a 3-part feature on BAME people who have literally changed the world, as well as social media around racism and stereotype awareness. In June, we shared the stories of the Windrush generation marking Windrush Day 2020. And it was under this administration that we put up a blue plaque on William Wilberforce's house in Uxbridge and unanimously voted with Labour to support the Conservative government's modern anti-slavery act. We continue to promote adoption and fostering, as well as further and higher education for all our diverse communities through Hillingdon People. I do hope you understand my reasoning for not selecting and commemorating our Black community's contribution to Hillingdon life for just 1 month a year, but think it's absolutely vital to keep their stories and contributions as one of our most important.
Councillor Lewis, you have run out of
cultures.
time. You have run out of time, unfortunately.
Well, okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We on this side will be voting against this motion.
Thank you. We're going to now go back to Councillor Curling. You now have your exercise right of reply as the mover of the original motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. I am very disappointed, and I think it shows just how out of touch we can be when we're not fully engaged with the people that we're making decisions around. I mean, I have no doubt that the intention is to value Black people, to value all of our communities. However, I believe you value them best when you celebrate their differences and welcome the difference that they bring. And that's why I think there should be a specific Black History Month, just as there should be a Pride Month for our LGBT residents, and any other month. I mean, we had a very, very successful celebration of Guru Nanak with planting of trees. I don't see why we shouldn't have special events for all of our communities within the borough. And I just think it's a lost opportunity, really. I mean, as we may know all about Windrush in Hillingdon, but as a nation, we sadly don't, or didn't, because there were many, as I said in my speech, many hard-working, dedicated people that had lived here all their lives, worked, supporting us for all of their life, and they were put in detention centres, treated as criminals, even deported to countries that didn't even recognise them. When that is going on, this isn't Minneapolis, this isn't about the police, this is about the UK, this is about residents in Hillingdon who may well have been victims of the Windrush scandal. So as I say, I'm not surprised, but I am very disappointed that we don't seem to have moved on. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we should now go to the vote. I will start with you, Councillor Curling. Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, is the motion approved?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to request this to be a recorded vote.
As a recorded vote has been expressed by Councillor Curling, I shall now ask the Head of Democratic Services to clarify the process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the process will be very similar under the suspension of standing orders that we agreed earlier. We'll still ask the two group leaders to vote on behalf of their respective groups. The only difference being that the names of those groups will be inserted in the minutes to show in individuals how they voted.
Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, is the motion approved?
Yeah, I approved, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group vote in favour of the motion.
Thank you. Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, is the motion approved?
No, Madam Mayor, the Conservative Group vote against the motion.
If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via the chat method. That motion has been lost. End of that item. We should go to motion 8.2 and Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Ethical Carers Charter. Madam Mayor, I'll never forget the moment earlier this year when my elderly grandfather turned to his paid carer who was visiting and asked if he'd done something wrong because no one was visiting. At that point, his short-term memory had failed him that we were in the middle of a lockdown and it was just him and I with regular visitors from paid carers. The coronavirus pandemic has had a significant impact on all of our communities, this nation and around the world, bringing isolation, social restrictions and job insecurity. We've heard about the rising domestic violence and some have lost loved ones. Within the pandemic and beyond, for those families who require paid carers, the virus has been a deeply worrying time, not knowing if they're placing their loved ones at more harm or less with each visit. And with the initial poor government guidance and lack of PPE, it made it even more worrying. And many families who I know chose not to have paid carers visit out of fear. But our paid carers do an amazing job. And this pandemic has provided an opportunity for all of us to reassess what is important and realign our sense of community and care for others. We now recognise new heroes, those in the NHS and those on the front line, including paid carers, many of whom have restricted their own lives in order to shield those that they work with. Paid carers for unpaid carers are a lifeline and have done us proud during this pandemic. It's important, therefore, that we as council reaffirm our commitment to protect and support vulnerable residents in our borough and the everyday heroes on the front line who assist them. So signing up to Unison's Ethical Care Charter would enable this council to benchmark its own care provision with that of a basic standard, one that goes beyond the basics to a degree in allowing carers to spend time together to develop good practice, one that goes beyond the legal employment basics of minimum wage or 0-hour contracts, one that goes beyond cost-cutting measures that are front-loaded onto the workers who have to accept worse and worse conditions. Conditions such as not being paid in between visits, having to reduce the amount of time they spend with someone for fear of not being able to get all their jobs in that day. It provides reassurance if we sign this charter of relatives of consistent care. It encourages retention of carers, and it enables the council to achieve the absolute of never attaining savings through running down paying conditions of our frontline heroes. By passing this motion to adopt the Charter, Hillingdon Council would establish a minimum baseline in safety, quality and dignity of care, whilst ensuring employment conditions of pay and levels of sickness and other aspects of employment law. As an unpaid carer, I have personal experience of the difference between the consistency of paid carers. The difference it makes when you have a regular carer is just vital. And although carers that visit who aren't there here as often are good, that consistency really helps. So anything we can do to support our carers who on a daily basis have their levels of morale beaten down by the low pay they receive and by the fact they're not paid between travelling jobs. How many of us here would work a 10-hour day and only get paid 7? We may do that for the promotion or the extra sale, but actually if that's what you're reliant on, if that's your normal as a low paid carer, which leads you to being overtired and unable to carry your duties as much as you would like because of exhaustion, it's just simply not good enough. And the outsourcing process of social care across this nation hasn't raised standards, but has led to this pressure on paying conditions of workers and therefore affected the level of care. The non-statutory payment that often occurs of minimum wage is rife in this sector. There's 0-hour contracts that abound. The few days of paid sick, which actually worries us because as carers, if someone doesn't feel able to take sick because they're not paid, take a sick day because they're not paid, the impact on the vulnerable person they're looking after for is huge. And that's not mentioning things such as decent pensions that helps carers who have worked their whole life with the vulnerable in our society having a bit of security of their own when they retire. Lord, Madam Mayor, this motion really provides a large opportunity for carers to come together and to be the support for one another as well as the support they would get from their employer, getting that best practice and opportunity to enable each other to know the best ways to approach things, to have a little bit more support from their initial training. The Charter allows the Council the chance to maybe share good practice across providers so that we can save through procurement process on equipment and uniforms rather than on wages. It also provides the opportunity for trade unions to provide a bigger perspective from employees across the region where they've seen good practice. So in finishing...
Councillor Mathers, you have run out of time.
Okay. I would just like to thank carers and I move the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Hello. To confirm, I'll be seconding the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Mathers for submitting this important motion that I'm delighted to second. This care charter is a testament to the excellent work that Unison do. Looking through the requirements of each stage, I find this motion to be very straightforward. I find it difficult to work out what the possible objection could be to such a well-intentioned motion. Madam Mayor, I would like to address each point of stage 1 of this charter individually. Number 1, the time allocated to visits will match the needs of the clients. This seems very straightforward to me. I anticipate that there may be resourcing and staffing concerns around this, but there are challenges that can be addressed. Number 2, care workers will be paid for their travel time, travel costs, and other necessary expenses such as mobile phones. Yes, any expenses incurred through carrying out a person's job should be funded by the employer. We as councillors get allowances to cover the expenses of doing our job as representatives. So if Hillingdon Council can provide us councillors with that level of support, I'm sure it's feasible to do so for care workers. Number 3, visits will be scheduled so that care workers are not forced to rush their time with clients or leave their clients early to get to the next one on time. I would be surprised if any councillor in this meeting disagrees with such a notion, because this seems simply like basic support for care workers. And finally, number 4, those workers who are eligible must be paid statutory sick pay. Madam Mayor, this is certainly not an unreasonable list of criteria. In fact, I would be shocked if Hillingdon are already not doing this. Perhaps when the Cabinet member responds, she will be able to explain in further detail exactly what here the Council does not already do and why not. And if the Council does already do this, then fantastic. There would therefore be no reason why this motion would be voted down. These are not an arbitrary set of demands listed. It is a commitment and an opportunity for the Council to stand up and say, yes, we support all of this and will do our best to achieve it. Adopting the Care Charter would be signalling that this Council and us as councillors have not spent the last few months clapping on our doorsteps on Thursday evenings, yet when faced with an opportunity to demonstrate our support for care workers, we stop clapping and we step back. I would be ashamed if that is what this council chooses to do. The only moral, ethical and decent position to take here is to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Prince. We'll move on to other speakers. The next speaker is Councillor Edgington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One point which needs to be emphasised this evening is that most of us virtually present at this meeting, plus the majority of the residents in Hillingdon, will need the support of care workers at several stages in their lives. And this proportion of the population will increase over the coming years as our population ages. With longer life expectation, there will be a greater need for more long-term illness, due to long-term illness. In order to cope with this inevitable process, there is a requirement to encourage younger people to join the social care sector. Sadly, in the past, here in Hillingdon, in the UK and in the developed world, care workers have not been treated fairly, taking into account the importance of their work. And just to remind Council, at the budget meeting this February, I expressed concern about the minimal increase provided in the social care budget. Indeed, the unsustainable nature of the whole social care sector has been demonstrated by the problems with almost all providers. Let me be blunt. The social care system has been shown to be at breaking point, and that was even before the present crisis due to COVID-19. Part of this is a result of this council, indeed all councils, paying for social care in care homes and for care at home at rates which are uneconomic. It has then been necessary for the service providers to pay staff at breadline rates, but also to charge their private care users at higher rates. Madam Mayor, that is a tax in all but name, and a tax only payable by those who are ill and in need. That is a unique and unfair method of taxation. The Prime Minister stated on the 23rd of July 2019 that he had, I quote, a clear plan of action to solve the social care crisis once and for all. 360 days since then and nothing has been offered, and the disgrace of our social care system continues. We can't solve the failure of national government, but by signing up to this charter, the Council will indicate that we are willing to honour our care workers, that we understand the efforts which they have made most recently as well as in the past. We hope that this will encourage people to join a profession which offers not just the satisfaction of providing help to those in need, but offers working conditions which we can then accept as fair and reasonable. I ask everybody to vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, you're down to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to this motion, which I accept is well intentioned, I state from the outset that this council is unreserved in its respect, recognition and appreciation of the efforts of all frontline workers during what continues to be challenging times. This appreciation has been demonstrated in a number of ways to both those directly employed by Hillingdon Council and all of those organisations that support the frontline delivery of social care services in the borough. I include also those councillors across party who've supported their residents by delivering food and medication. The social care services provided directly by this council already meet or exceed those stipulated as a minimum in the Charter and agency, and contracted workers receive pay parity. All organisations contracted to provide social care services have been secured through the required procurement processes, which examine companies' ability to provide services to the quality and standard expected. This includes the recruitment, training and retention of a workforce to provide a continuity of care for residents. Beyond meeting those requirements, it is not the place of the council to determine how companies manage their businesses. Where during an award contract period companies fall short of these requirements, there is a strong care governance approach in place which will work with providers to either remedy the concerns or utilise appropriate contractual sanctions. Where providers within the borough operate but do not have contracts within the council, it remains our duty to monitor the quality and safeguarding of our service users in these services. In doing so, the quality assurance team and the regulators monitor the recruitment, retention and conditions of employment of staff to ensure that these are satisfactory. The Charter therefore offers nothing to improve the already strong, transparent processing and governance which secures and monitors the quality of care provision in the borough. It may also serve to set inflexible parameters which limit actions required to sustain the quality of care Hillingdon residents have a right to expect when market conditions or circumstances change. In conclusion, I would like to place on record my thanks to all of those who have worked tirelessly and professionally to ensure our residents continue to receive the high quality services that this fine council deliver. There is no need for this charter. We are already doing it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Mathers, you can now exercise your right to reply as a mover of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do feel there's a distinct lack of reality from the procured services particularly, and I'm sure officers do all they can within the parameters they're given to ensure we get the best value for money and the services for those who are most vulnerable. But I really don't feel that this administration is recognising the value of paid carers by not adhering to this charter, particularly those that are procured or through different agencies. It may be that, you know, they are supporters of those who we value the most in society, who I do appreciate the note of thanks and also echo that note of thanks to all those paid care workers in Hillingdon and beyond. But it does feel very much like it is just words, and that is little comfort to those who are on lower pay, who are struggling to make ends meet because they're unable to fix their car and have to walk between their workplaces. The council does have an ethical and moral duty to ensure that employers that they provide funds to carry out services are doing the best they should, and beyond that are meeting not just the legal standard but actually the ethical standard that our residents would expect within a service for our most vulnerable groups. And so it is a shared disappointment that I experienced with Councillor Curling tonight, but no surprise that when there's a standard that's set which could help this council achieve more than just the basics, it shies away and doesn't wish to do so to protect and support its vulnerable residents and their workers.
Thank you. We shall now go to the vote. I will start with you, Councillor Curling. Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, is the motion approved?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, we are requesting a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been expressed by Councillor Curling. The Head of Democratic Services has explained the recorded vote process on this virtual meeting already on motion 8.1. The same process applies for motion 8.2. Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, is the motion approved?
Approved, Madam Mayor. We vote in favour.
Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, is the motion approved?
The motion is not approved, Madam Mayor. We vote against the motion.
That motion has been lost. Oh, sorry. Before we go there, if there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via the chat method. That motion has been lost. That brings us to the end of the ordinary meeting. Please do not unmute yourselves while leaving the meeting, as the live stream has not been turned off yet and what you say may be heard and recorded. If you want to stay logged on until the live stream stops, you must stay muted. I wish you all a pleasant evening and we'll see you at the next full council ordinary meeting on September the 10th. Meeting closed.